Vladimir Putin has never been shy about speaking his mind, especially when it comes to global power dynamics. Recently, in one of his more candid remarks, Putin said, "It's impossible to stop China. The US is trying, but it's too late. They're already there." Strong words, but what did he really mean? And more importantly, is he right? Let's take a deeper look. 1945 marks the moment when America's global dominance began, largely because it won the war while its rivals were left in ashes. The US dollar became the cornerstone of the international monetary system, solidified by the 1944 Bretton Woods system, which tied global currencies to the dollar and indirectly to gold. Washington became the de facto capital of global politics, while Wall Street evolved into the nerve center of world finance. The US led the formation of key international institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and NATO, placing itself at the center of global governance. Its military bases circled the globe, and its nuclear arsenal served as a symbol of power. Throughout the Cold War, American leadership was framed as moral imperative to stand against the spread of the communist system, especially from the Soviet Union. But that dominance, as Putin hints, is now being challenged. The rise of multipolarity, the return of nationalism, and the emergence of economic powerhouses like China have begun to erode the foundations of the American century. The unipolar moment is over, and the world is shifting once again. China's journey from poverty to power is one of the most remarkable transformations in modern history. Back in the 1980s, under the pragmatic leadership of Deng Xiaoping, China embraced a bold experiment: economic liberalization without political democratization. Deng's famous phrase, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice," captured the spirit of this new era. The government opened special economic zones, invited foreign investment, and shifted millions of workers from collective farms to factory floors. This was the beginning of what the world would come to call the Chinese miracle. Factories multiplied across the eastern seaboard. Entire cities like Shenzhen rose from fishing villages to global tech hubs in just a few decades. Massive infrastructure projects connected regions, while new highways, airports, and bullet trains signaled China's leap into modernity. Between 1981 and 2010, according to the World Bank, China lifted more than 800 people out of extreme poverty, a feat unmatched in human history. By the 2000s, China had firmly established itself as the world's manufacturing powerhouse, producing everything from cheap toys to high-end electronics. China lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. President Putin once remarked, "That's not just economic growth, that's real strength." How many nations in history have achieved such a transformation in just one generation? America watched China's rise with growing concern. Throughout the 2000s, the US assumed that China's integration into the global economy would eventually lead to political liberalization and cooperation. But by the 2010s, that assumption began to crumble. Instead of becoming more like us, China became more assertive economically, technologically, and geopolitically. In response, the US began pushing back. Under Trump, America launched a sweeping trade war, slapping tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. The justification? Intellectual property theft, trade imbalances, and unfair market practices. But tariffs were just the beginning. America moved to restrict Chinese tech giants. Huawei, once poised to lead the world in 5G technology, faced crippling bans. Semiconductor exports to China were tightened. US lawmakers pressured allies to keep Chinese firms out of critical infrastructure, from telecom networks to AI partnerships. The goal was clear: slow China's technological rise. Militarily, the US doubled down on the so-called alliances in the Indo-Pacific, joint military exercises with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines increased. Strategic agreements like the AUKUS, Australia-UK-US Pact, and the revival of the Quad, US, Japan, India, Australia, signaled a coordinated effort to counterbalance Beijing's regional ambitions. But Putin doesn't believe this will stop anything. He says, you can't sanction the future. You can't isolate a country that builds half the world's infrastructure. He's pointing to something many Americans don't see up close: the Belt and Road Initiative, China's $1 trillion infrastructure and investment program that now spans over 140 countries. Chinese companies are constructing roads in Africa, ports in the Middle East, railways in Southeast Asia, and power plants in Latin America. These projects not only create trade routes, but also forge political and economic ties that bypass the West. While America tightens restrictions, China deepens its global footprint, especially in regions where American influence has waned. This is not just a trade war, it's a clash of long-term visions. So the question remains, is the US responding too late? Can reactive measures compete with a decades-long strategy that's already transforming the global landscape? In the eyes of leaders like Putin, America's pushback may be powerful, but also desperate. China, they believe, is not just rising, it's restoring the world. Russia and China have not always been close. For much of the 20th century, their relationship was defined by border disputes and mutual suspicion, even during the Cold War, when both adopted the same ideology. The 1969 Sino-Soviet border conflict nearly erupted into full-scale war, and for decades afterward, their paths remained divergent. But in recent years, especially since 2014, when Russia was hit with sweeping Western sanctions, the two nations have drawn noticeably nearer. Isolated economically and diplomatically from the West, Russia turned to China, which was more than willing to extend a hand. China became a vital economic lifeline. Bilateral trade has surged, reaching record highs each year. Energy deals have become central. Russia supplies China with vast quantities of oil and natural gas, including through major pipelines like the Power of Siberia. This has helped Russia cushion the impact of sanctions, while giving China secure access to energy at favorable terms. The bond has extended into military sphere as well. The two powers now regularly conduct joint military exercises on land, at sea, and in the air, sometimes even simulating operations against shared adversaries. Their defense ties have deepened through arms sales, technology transfers, and coordinated regional security policies. After Russia's special military operation in Ukraine in 2022, China stopped short of endorsing the war, but refused to condemn Russia. Instead, it offered rhetorical support for Russia's security concerns and accused the West of provocation. While Western leaders called it appeasement, China framed its stance as neutral diplomacy. We are not allies in the traditional sense, Putin said, but we understand each other. It's a strategic friendship built on deep trust, but on converging interests and shared opposition to Western dominance. Both governments view the US and NATO as threats to their spheres of influence, and both seek a multipolar world where Western liberal democracy is no longer the global default. Their cooperation is pragmatic. China benefits from discounted Russian resources and a distracted West, while Russia gains a powerful partner to counterbalance US pressure. Yet, underlying tensions remain. Many compare today's China to the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but Putin sees a major difference. The Soviet Union had ideology and missiles. China has markets, money, and discipline. Is this why Putin thinks the US has already lost this battle. Today, more countries are trading with China than with the US. From Africa to Southeast Asia to Latin America, China is offering deals, building infrastructure, and quietly gaining influence. The era of Western dominance is ending, Putin declared. The East is rising not with noise, but with results. Think about that. While the US debates policies in Congress, China is building highways and high speed rail across Eurasia. Which one seems more focused? Here's the big question. Can America really stop China's rise? Maybe not. And maybe that's not the right question anymore. The world is moving toward multipolarity, where power is shared among several big players, not just one. Putin believes China is leading that transformation. America is fighting a battle it can't win, he said, not because they're weak, but because history is moving on. China is not storming the world with tanks or missiles. It's doing it with investments, ideas, and quiet confidence. Putin says, you don't need war when you control the future. So, what's next? Will the US adapt and share the stage? Or try to hold on to a world that no longer exists? One thing is certain, China's rise is not coming, it's here, and the world is watching.